Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Ukrainian President Zelensky and EU leaders are meeting in France for an emergency defence summit. The Kremlin has hit out at France's Macron as deadly strikes hit Zelensky's hometown. US President Donald Trump issues a last warning to Hamas, ordering the release of Israeli hostages. Meanwhile, Hamas has confirmed that direct talks have been held with US officials over hostage releases, with Israel also being consulted. Chinese President Xi says that China is ready for any type of war with the US in response to the latest American tariffs. Trump says tariffs on Canadian and Mexican automakers will be paused, while Macron slams expected EU duties. At least 15 people have been injured after a South Korean fighter jet accidentally drops 8 bombs on a civilian area. The South Korean Air Force says an investigation is underway as 2 people remain in a serious condition. The United States has suspended intelligence sharing with Ukraine, a move that could significantly impact Kyiv's military operations against Russian forces. This decision follows the US halting military aid to Ukraine. Here are the latest updates.
The US has suspended intelligence sharing with Kyiv. This move could severely restrict the Ukrainian military's ability to strike Russian forces and plan military operations effectively. CIA Director John Ratcliffe confirmed the pause in support, but indicated that cooperation could resume if peace talks between Ukraine and Russia move forward. Since the start of the war in 2022, the US has provided Ukraine with significant intelligence, including critical information that its military needs. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has expressed willingness to negotiate with Russia, saying his country is ready to come to the table for lasting peace. Meanwhile, a Russian missile strike on a hotel in the Ukrainian city of Kryvyi Rih killed 4 people. The city has been a frequent target since the war started 3 years ago. Despite ongoing attacks, Ukraine continues to push for an end to the war. Bureau Report, NewsX World.
We'll now take a look at the latest from across North America. Hundreds of US diplomats have joined to write a letter to US Secretary of State Marco Rubio protesting the disassembly of US aid. The diplomats expressed their concern about how this might create a vacuum for China and Russia to exploit. More than 700 diplomats have signed the letter expressing their concerns. 3 skiers have been swept away by an avalanche on Tuesday afternoon. The snow deposited by the avalanche was up to 100 feet deep, and the skiers were likely buried at depths greater than 30 feet. Poor weather conditions for the past 2 days have kept skiers at the site. Troops were used, hopeful the conditions will improve today. The Department of Veterans Affairs is planning a reorganisation. This would include cutting down 80,000 jobs from agencies providing care and services to thousands of veterans. They have been vocal in their opposition to the cuts and the VA, as more than 25% of the VA's workforce is comprised of veterans. A new travel ban by President Donald Trump could bar people from Afghanistan and Pakistan from entering the US. Trump's directive is part of an immigration crackdown that he launched at the start of his second term. The new ban could affect tens of thousands of Afghans who have been cleared for resettlement in the US as refugees. Meanwhile, Trump is all set to sign an executive order to facilitate the closure of the education department. This move is part of Trump's campaign to decentralize education. This has angered the Democrats, teachers, and parents who see this as an attack on the public education system. Democratic mayors from 4 US cities, Boston, Chicago, Denver and New York, were criticised in Congress for their pro-criminal immigration policies. All 4 cities have struggled to cope with a huge influx of migrants crossing from Mexico. Republicans are trying to support President Donald Trump's approach to deporting migrants. EU countries are currently deliberating on Europe's defence strategy and their support for Ukraine, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky attending the discussions. Here is a comprehensive report on the latest developments.
Latest updates from the EU Emergency Summit reveal President Volodymyr Zelensky's heartfelt thanks to Europe for its continued support. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen highlighted that Europe and Ukraine are facing a pivotal moment. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz warned against the prospect of a dictated peace in Ukraine as concerns rise over Washington's overtures to Moscow potentially leading to an unfavorable settlement for Kyiv. The heads of the 27 EU nations and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky are meeting at a special summit in Brussels to discuss the future of the ongoing conflict. The Dutch government will allocate €3.5 billion, $3.8 billion, to continue supporting Ukraine in 2026, with €700 million dedicated to investing in drones for Ukraine, according to Prime Minister Dick Schoof. Recently, France's President Emmanuel Macron warned that Europe is at a turning point of history, stating that decisive steps would be taken in Brussels to make European countries more ready to defend and protect themselves. Nerves have grown increasingly frayed across Europe since Trump and Zelensky's showdown at the White House last week.
Alors c'est une excellente question. Je pense que pour nos amis britanniques qui sont quand même dans une communauté du renseignement avec les États-Unis, c'est plus compliqué. Nous, notre renseignement est souverain. Ça a été plus long de remonter en puissance ces dernières années, mais l'avantage c'est que nous l'avons fait effectivement avec des capacités qui nous sont propres. Donc oui, on a des moyens de renseignement dont nous faisons bénéficier les Ukrainiens.
In a sign of growing concern, President Macron stated that France is open to discussing extending the protection of its nuclear arsenal to its European partners. This came after a call from Friedrich Merz, likely to be Germany's next chancellor, urging talks on increased nuclear sharing.
Europe is ready to assume its responsibilities. Rearm Europe could mobilize close to €800 billion of defense expenditures for a safe and resilient Europe. We will, of course, continue working closely with our partners in NATO. This is a moment for Europe, and we are ready to step up.
European Council President Antonio Costa called it a defining moment for Ukraine and European security. In a recent television broadcast, French President Emmanuel Macron emphasized that Russian aggression knows no borders and warned that it won't stop. Macron also stated that the moment calls for unprecedented decisions. Time will reveal what kind of unprecedented decisions are made today and what role the EU will play in the eventual resolution of the conflict. Bureau Report, NewsX World.
We'll stay in Europe for more of the latest updates. Britain strongly condemned the sentencing of UK national James Anderson to 19 years in prison by a Russian court, which accused him of having fought for the Ukrainian army. We strongly condemn the sentencing of James Anderson, a British national, in a Russian court on false charges, said a spokesperson for the Foreign Office. The Vatican appears to have modified its stance on gender-affirming surgery and gender theory. Recently, the Vatican published a speech by Doctor-in-Chief Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, in which he stated there are cases outside the norm, such as strong dysphorias that can lead to an unbearable existence or even suicide. These exceptional situations must be evaluated with great care. A UK Island summit marks a significant reset in relations between the two governments in the post-Brexit era, according to Irish PM Michael Martin. Martin met with Keir Starmer ahead of the summit, where cabinet members from both countries will participate in Liverpool. As part of the summit, Ireland will announce new investments into the UK worth over £185 million, which the UK government says could create more than 2,500 jobs across the country. The Trump administration has reportedly held secret talks with Hamas in Doha over the release of hostages. After the talks, President Trump warned of more destruction in Gaza if hostages aren't freed. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council met over fears of a looming food shortage in Gaza. Here is the full update.
The Trump administration has reportedly engaged in confidential negotiations with Hamas regarding the possible release of US hostages held in Gaza. The discussions, which mark a historic first for the US, were held in Doha over the past few weeks by Adam Boehler, the US presidential envoy for hostage affairs.
Well, when it comes to the negotiations that you're referring to, first of all, the special envoy who's engaged in those negotiations does have the authority to talk to anyone. Israel was consulted on this matter.
Fresh out of the discussions, US President addressed strong statements to Hamas. Trump threatened further destruction of Gaza if all remaining hostages are not released and issued an ultimatum to Hamas leaders to flee. Taking to Truth Social, he posted, "Release all of the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all of the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it is over for you." He continued also to the people of Gaza, "A beautiful future awaits, but not if you hold hostages. If you do, you are dead. Make a smart decision." On the other hand, the United Nations Security Council held consultations in a closed session on Wednesday morning as the global body has warned of an impending food shortage in the Gaza Strip. Palestinians in Gaza are going hungry as Israel's blockade causes high prices and food shortages, with the World Food Programme warning its stocks could run out in less than 2 weeks. In a separate development, Lieutenant General Al-Zamir replaces Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi as Israel's military chief after the October 7th Hamas attack. Netanyahu reaffirmed Israel's goal of total victory, while Halevi called for an independent inquiry into security lapses. Bureau Report, NewsX World.
Now for the latest from across the Indo-Pacific region. China has kept its economic growth target for this year unchanged at roughly 5% while committing more fiscal resources than last year. This decision has been made to fend off deflationary pressures and mitigate the impact of rising US trade tariffs. Economists believe that 5% growth target, which is in line with 2024's figure, will be challenging. China reached its target last year with a last-minute export boom. Exports surged by 10.7% in December, pushing China's trade surplus to a record $1 trillion. An explosion at Chuo Springs plant in Aichi Prefecture in central Japan has killed 1 person and injured 2 others. The officials said the blast involved a dust collector inside the Fujioka plant, which supplies auto parts to Toyota Motor. A similar accident occurred at the same factory in 2023, which forced the automaker to partially suspend production at some domestic plants. A Toyota spokesman acknowledged news reports of the blast and said the company was trying to verify details of what happened. Mehdi Yarahi, a prominent Iranian pop singer who made a song urging women to remove their headscarves, commented that he was willing to pay a price for freedom. This followed him being flogged 74 times by the authorities as part of his sentence. Mehdi Yarahi, arrested in 2023, was released last year after being convicted for his song in support of the Women Life Freedom protests that erupted in 2022. Rations will be halved for around 1 million Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh from next month due to a lack of funds. Huge numbers of the persecuted and stateless Rohingya community live in squalid relief camps in Bangladesh, most arriving after having fled from a 2017 military crackdown in Myanmar. The UN World Food Programme said in a letter that severe funding shortfalls had forced a cut in monthly food vouchers from $12.5 to $6 per person. The letter added, "Unfortunately, we have still not received sufficient funding and cost-saving measures alone are not enough." Hong Kong's top court has overturned the convictions of 3 former pro-democracy group members, citing a miscarriage of justice. The group organised an annual vigil for China's 1989 Tiananmen Square crackdown. This ruling is a rare victory for Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement, which has seen many activists jailed or exiled. All this while many liberal civil society groups have been closed. Khalistani extremists harassed and tried to assault Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar in London. It happened as he was leaving a car after attending an event at the Chatham House think tank. Pro-Khalistan supporters staged a protest outside the venue where Dr. Jaishankar participated in a discussion held by Chatham House. A video circulating online shows a man running towards Jaishankar's vehicle and tearing the Indian national flag in front of London police officers who seemed to be unresponsive to the act of vandalism. In a tragic incident earlier today, a South Korean Air Force fighter jet accidentally released bombs over a civilian area during a training exercise, resulting in multiple injuries and significant property damage. Here is the latest.
The town of Pocheon, located approximately 40 kilometers northeast of Seoul, was abruptly disrupted this morning when a South Korean KF-16 fighter jet accidentally dropped 8 10K-82 bombs during a routine training exercise.
오늘 우리 포천시에 있을 수 없는 일이 벌어졌습니다. 승진 과학 훈련장에서 실시 중인 한미 연합 사격 훈련 중 포탄이 민가에 떨어져 무고한 시민들께서 중경상을 입고 수채의 가옥과 차량이 파손되는 끔찍한 사고가 발생을 했습니다.
The unintended release occurred around 10 a.m. local time, with the bombs landing outside the designated firing range, impacting residential areas. Emergency services reported that 15 individuals sustained injuries, 2 of whom are in serious condition. The incident also resulted in the destruction of a church and 6 other buildings in the village.
지역에 포탄이 떨어진 사건은 공군의 훈련 관리 및 안전 절차가 심각하게 미비했음을 여실히 보여주는 사고로 이에 대한 책임을 엄중히 묻지 않을 수.
The South Korean Air Force has expressed deep regret over the incident, stating, "We deeply regret the unintended release of the bombs, which resulted in civilian casualties and wish those injured a swift recovery." An accident response committee has been established to investigate the cause of the malfunction and to assess the full extent of the damages. Local residents have long voiced concerns over the proximity of military training exercises to civilian areas, citing potential dangers and disturbances. This incident comes just days before the annual Freedom Shield exercises, a series of joint drills between South Korea and the United States aimed at strengthening defense readiness. As investigations proceed, the focus remains on providing medical assistance to the injured and addressing the concerns of the affected community. The South Korean military has pledged comprehensive measures to prevent such incidents in the future. Bureau Report, NewsX World.
We'll now take a look at the latest from across the world of business. Macy's, a department store chain, has forecasted lower than expected annual sales and profit due to cautious consumer spending amid economic uncertainty. The chain expects 2025 net sales to be between $21 billion and $21.4 billion, which is slightly lower than what analysts expected. The company is betting on sales growth by opening more stores of the better performing luxury divisions, Bloomingdale's and Bluemercury. Chinese e-commerce giant JD.com exceeded market expectations for quarterly growth as discounts and price cuts encouraged customers to spend more, driving up sales. JD.com has reported a total revenue of nearly 347 billion yuan for the fourth quarter, a 13.4% increase from a year earlier. E-com giants like JD have slashed prices on everything to lure shoppers into buying at a time when consumption in China has slowed down sharply. Seven & I, the owner of the 7-Eleven convenience store chain, has appointed its first foreign CEO. Stephen Dacus will succeed Ryuichi Isaka as CEO effective on May the 27th. Dacus has been handed the task of overhauling the business to fend off a $47 billion overseas takeover bid. The company also announced plans to sell its superstore unit for $5.5 billion and reduce its stake in the Seven Bank. DHL has announced plans to cut about 8,000 jobs in Germany this year as part of a strategy to save more than €1 billion by 2027. This decision comes as the logistics giant reported a 7% fall in annual operating profit. Verdi, the second largest trade union in Germany, has criticised the move and urged politicians to act. Analysts also expect a slower profit growth for DHL in 2025. Melrose Industries, the owner of GKN Aerospace, has forecasted its 2025 revenue to be between £3.55 and £3.7 billion, falling short of analysts' expectations of £3.77 billion. Shares of the aerospace parts supplier dropped as much as 12%, making it the biggest loser on the FTSE 100 index. The aerospace parts supplier has faced production delays and supply chain issues. The company reported £540 million in adjusted operating profit for 2024. Tensions rise and economies shake. President Trump's new tariffs have sparked a global trade war. In his speech to Congress, Trump targeted India, China and Canada, escalating tensions. Canada retaliated with tariffs on $20.7 billion worth of US goods, while China imposed tariffs on US agricultural exports. As Trump's actions continue to trigger price hikes and threaten US economic growth, the stakes in this trade conflict keep rising. Here is how it all unfolded.
The Trump administration is thinking of carving out certain agricultural products from tariffs imposed on Mexico and Canada. However, Trump made it clear that he was not calling off his trade war with Canada and Mexico as he pressures both countries to deter fentanyl smuggling.
I think it's a little bit disrespectful to the families in this country who have lost loved ones at the hands of this deadly poison. If you talk to them, and this president has, they are grateful that they finally have a president who is standing up to both Canada and Mexico, and most importantly to China as well. The president added an additional 10% tariff on China because this deadly poison is being produced in that country. It's being distributed through our neighbors, and there needs to be consequences for that, period.
The Chinese embassy in the US said in a post on social media site X that if war is what the US wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we are ready to fight till the end. China Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian made similar remarks. The remarks came as Trump's additional 10% tariffs on imports from China took effect Tuesday.
如果美方在错误的道路上越行越远，我们将 奉陪到底。中方始终认为，中美经贸关系本质是互利共赢，不存在谁永远吃亏、谁永远占便宜的问题。
Trump's tariffs pose extreme difficulties for automakers, which produce vehicles in all three countries, which often ship parts across North American borders multiple times as they get built into systems and finished vehicles. US President Donald Trump will exempt automakers from 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico for a month, as long as they comply with existing free trade rules. French President Emmanuel Macron on Wednesday also expressed concerns over shifting US policies, noting that Washington's reduced support towards Ukraine.
Nous devons aussi nous préparer à ce que les États-Unis décident de tarifs douaniers sur les marchandises européennes, comme ils viennent de le confirmer à l'encontre du Canada et du Mexique. Cette décision incompréhensible, tant pour l'économie américaine que pour la nôtre, aura des conséquences sur certaines de nos filières. Elle accroît la difficulté du moment, mais elle ne restera pas sans réponse de notre part.
The ongoing trade war has raised concerns over economic stability, increasing calls for dialogue and de-escalation to prevent further disruptions to international markets. Bureau Report, NewsX World.
We'll now get the latest from across South America. Argentine President Javier Milei faces fraud charges over his endorsement of the Libra cryptocurrency. The lead prosecutor has requested the freezing of $100 million in assets and the recovery of deleted social media posts, including Milei's tweets promoting the token. The post was removed after the token's value plummeted, causing losses. Milei denied involvement in the project, claiming he shared the token's potential in good faith. Panama President Jose Raul Mulino said that US President Donald Trump was lying when he said that his administration was reclaiming the Panama Canal. Trump's comments to Congress came after a deal led by US firm BlackRock was announced earlier on Tuesday. The firm will buy most of the port's businesses of the Hong Kong conglomerate CK Hutchison. The European Union and Brazil have signed an agreement that strengthens the partnership between Europol and Brazilian law enforcement. This will enable the exchange of operational information. Brazil is the first country in Latin America to sign such an agreement with the EU. The agreement is now subject to the European Parliament's consent before its final implementation. Chilean President Gabriel Boric and German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier on Wednesday discussed the war in Ukraine, global trade and international stability during a meeting in Santiago. Speaking at a joint press conference at La Monada Palace, Boric said Chile remained deeply concerned about global conflicts. He emphasised that respect for international law is the only path to stabilising lasting peace. COP30 President-designate André de Largo says Brazil is using its COP30 presidency to push for multilateralism and scientific respect. In his first address as leader, he emphasised the need for global collaboration at the November summit in Belém. His comments come amid US climate turmoil, with Trump withdrawing from the Paris Agreement and reducing US climate funding. That is all we have time for, but we'll continue to bring you more of the latest.